I believe that when we were young, everyone wondered how modern the future world would be, whether our own lives would turn out as we imagined, or if we would meet the desired significant other. I believe that these are issues many people have contemplated, and precisely because humanity is so curious about the future, people have long considered how to achieve time travel through science and technology. It was in 1943 that René Barjavel, a French novelist, presented an argument in his book. He suggested, assuming time travel could be achieved in the future, what if someone went back to the past and killed their grandfather? Then the person's father would not be born. Without the father, the person would not exist. So who killed the grandfather? This is the famous grandfather paradox. Although this paradox originated in a novel, it caused a huge public stir. People began to believe that the grandfather paradox perfectly explained that time travel certainly could not become a reality. However, in 2016, during research projects at NASA, scientists detected neutrino particles flying in the reverse direction at the South Pole. This event shocked the scientific community at the time, because neutrinos are born during the Big Bang, and they should only be able to shoot towards the Earth's surface from space. Yet, NASA's equipment detected these neutrinos flying up from the ground, and even their spin orientation was unusual. Normal neutrinos spin to the left, while the neutrinos at the South Pole spun to the right. This abnormal behavior of the neutrinos prompted the participating scientist, Peter Gorham, to propose a bold hypothesis. He suggested that the time of these neutrinos at the South Pole was running backward, which is why we observed them moving in reverse. This inevitably makes me think of the movie Tenet, which premiered 2 years prior, where it mentioned people in the future could control the direction of the time flow by reversing entropy, and thereby travel back to the past to change the present. Isn't this very similar to the neutrinos we observed at the South Pole? Could someone be controlling time? Indeed, shortly after learning about this video's information, I discovered another truly astonishing case of time travel. Furthermore, instances of time travel have occurred repeatedly long before. Perhaps you and I have even unintentionally time traveled, we just didn't notice it. And among these cases, the story of Sergey Ponomarenko is the most famous. However, many important details have been lost from the version of the story most people are familiar with. Hold tight, everyone! Earth-shattering news is about to be revealed. Today we will talk about the most incredible man from the future in history. What if one day, while walking down a familiar street, you suddenly notice a tree that wasn't there yesterday, and then just one day later, that tree is gone? Or perhaps while drinking coffee and chatting with friends, you suddenly realize that the scene and even the conversation feels strangely familiar. If so, congratulations, you might have time traveled. In 2012, the Ukrainian television channel 1+1 unexpectedly reported a documentary case of time travel, and the story instantly became international news because there were many details considered as evidence proving that this man truly was a time traveler. The whole story began in 2006. On April 23rd of that year, a young man dressed strangely suddenly appeared on a street in Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine. Because the young man was clearly wearing outdated clothes and kept lingering around, he attracted the attention of a policeman named Sergey Ponomarenko. But before the officer could ask anything, the young man approached him and asked for help. The police officer recalled that the young man's behavior was very strange. After a brief conversation, the police officer immediately asked him for identification, but the young man pulled out. The image below is the video recording made and kept by the doctor regarding the patient's condition. According to Dr. Klutov's account, he felt the young man was very uneasy and extremely vigilant, even unwilling to speak with him. Although Sergey didn't think the doctor could help him, the doctor eventually found a way to get Sergey to talk. After a long conversation, Sergey produced an identity card proving he was truly born in 1932. This made the doctor ask, "If you were truly born in 1932, then what day do you think today is?" Sergey answered. The doctor said that at first, he didn't take Sergey's words seriously, because he had treated patients with abnormal perception of space or time. Especially those who had suffered severe trauma were more likely to experience this. For such patients, the best treatment is to help them restore their memory. Therefore, the doctor asked him a question. According to Sergey's account, he was 25 years old and worked as a railway maintenance technician. April 23, 1958 was his day off. Because the weather was beautiful, Sergey decided to take his newly bought Zorky camera out for photos. But unexpectedly, he ran into an unidentified flying object at the corner of the street. Sergey said he had never seen the bell-shaped object fly, so he immediately took out his camera to photograph this bell. But what he didn't expect was that after pressing the shutter, he suddenly went from 1958 to 2006. One can imagine that after hearing Sergey's story, the doctor was certain the man was seriously delusional and would require long-term treatment. However, before the doctor could contemplate further, Sergey unexpectedly asked a question. "That's strange." Right after the doctor looked down at his wristwatch, he discovered that for some unknown reason, his watch had stopped. Moreover, the time on his wristwatch was exactly the same as the wall clock, 12:31. But according to the doctor, they had been talking for at least 30 minutes or more. Let's look again. This is the image of Sergey just entering the consultation room. At this moment, the time on the wall clock is 12:31, identical to the video recording the doctor made. But for some unknown reason, ever since Sergey entered the consultation room, all time-measuring devices in the room had stopped functioning. The doctor said, although he found it very strange at the time, time was not what he was most concerned about. What he cared about most was how to help Sergey regain normal consciousness. So he escorted Sergey out of the consultation room and instructed the nurse to arrange a room for him to rest. The strange thing is, after the doctor settled everything and returned to the consultation room, he found that the wall clock and his wristwatch both started running again, but both devices were 30 minutes slow. Think about it. What is the probability that two different time-telling devices stop at the exact same moment and then start running again at the same moment? Could it be that the time in the consultation room was somehow paused? It's truly astonishing. Examples of this kind of time being temporarily paused. We seem unable to move. It wasn't until Mr. Smith detached the device that the police officers regained their freedom. At this point, Mr. Smith asked the police to look at the time on his wristwatch. They were then astonished to find that Mr. Smith's device could freeze time, and moreover, it could designate a certain space to change the speed of the time flow within that space. Normally, drawing a gun takes a very short time, but when the flow rate within that space slows down, the world perceived by people changes. At the end of this article, the reporter located the inventor, Mr. Smith, and according to his account, this time control device could not be considered his invention, because the method to control time was recorded in the principles of electrical engineering long ago. We just hadn't discovered it. This makes me think of Nikola Tesla, because Tesla was an inventor who deeply understood the principles of electrical engineering back then. Besides inventing alternating current, he even invented free energy. But after Tesla died, many of his inventions were classified as secret by the FBI. This makes people wonder, could there be a time control device in those classified documents? Not only that, the FBI also released a partial declassified file in 2020, pointing out that Tesla was a Venusian. I know this is hard to believe, but the document is from the FBI's declassified website after all. Everyone, think about it. If there was no evidence at all, would this document have been classified as secret by the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation? It is noteworthy that, like many of Tesla's other inventions, the subsequent progress of Mr. Smith's time control device is also unknown. In fact, if I hadn't seen the article about this incident, I wouldn't have even known that someone had successfully invented a time-freezing device. And if time can be temporarily paused, doesn't that indicate that Sergey's story could also be true? Let's return to Sergey's story. Immediately after Sergey left the consultation room, Dr. Klutov saw that time started running again. Despite this, he still didn't believe Sergey's story. He thought the best thing to do now was to develop the film inside Sergey's camera, because according to Sergey's account, he had photographed a flying bell before he time traveled. And it was because of this that Sergey believed he had time traveled. Therefore, as long as the doctor developed the photos to prove that Sergey had been living in 2006 all along, Sergey would surely understand that everything was just his own hallucination. Thus, the doctor took the film from Sergey, unexpectedly. When the photographer saw the camera, he was very surprised, because this camera was a Zorky model, or an old model, and production had stopped as early as 1960. Even the film inside made the photographer confused. But the film was very well preserved, so they successfully developed the photos in the end. The first photo was a street scene. This photo was later confirmed to be the city of Kyiv in the 1950s. The second photo was of Sergey, and the coat Sergey wore in the photo was exactly the same coat he was wearing when he arrived in 2006. The third photo was of a young girl. The last photo was the most astonishing because it truly contained a bell-shaped flying object. The doctor said that when he received the developed photos from the photographer, he was completely stunned. UFOs are frequently seen around the world, and the most common type is the disc shape. Even the unidentified aerial phenomena first acknowledged by the U.S. Navy in 2019 are disc-shaped. The only difference is that after Sergey saw it, he time-traveled. Could it be that the UFO was using a special method to travel through time, and the person holding the camera, Sergey, accidentally activated some device that made him time travel too? According to Sergey's account, his time travel happened in an instant and unconsciously. And there are many similar cases in history. For example, in 1969, National Airlines Flight 727 suddenly disappeared from the radar screen. However, 10 minutes later, the plane reappeared at the same location. But the captain said nothing special had happened, and they hadn't heard the control tower call, yet the time on the plane was 10 minutes slower. Could it be that the plane was flying in another time-space at that moment, which caused time to pause? This is very similar to what happened to Sergey, because as soon as he appeared, time in that space was temporarily paused. It only returned to normal after he left. Perhaps sensing that Sergey's experience was not simple, the doctor met with Sergey again on April 26th. This time, the doctor asked him for his 1958 address to see if he could find his family. At that time, Sergey gave the doctor a piece of paper with an address. The doctor then gave the address to the police officer who brought Sergey in. The police officer went to the location, but found that the street name Sergey gave was old, making it difficult to find the exact location. However, they discovered that the wooden house at the address had long disappeared. After hearing this news, the doctor immediately relayed it to Sergey. When Sergey heard the information, his mood became extremely distraught, and he even asked to go back to his room to calm down a bit. The camera outside the consultation room also recorded Sergey leaving the room. But what the doctor didn't expect was that this was the last time he would see Sergey. According to the doctor's account, on the morning of the 27th, the nurse found that Sergey was no longer in the room. Moreover, they searched the entire building but could not find Sergey. They were shocked to discover that Sergey had vanished. So they immediately contacted the doctor and checked the camera footage. And they found that since Sergey entered the room on the 26th, he had not stepped out. Furthermore, Sergey's room only had one window facing outside, but this window was sealed shut by iron bars. So the question arises, how could Sergey have disappeared right inside the room? Of course, similar incidents have occurred in various places around the world. For example, in 1954, a passenger suddenly appeared at Haneda Airport in Japan, carrying a passport from a non-existent country, and he eventually disappeared miraculously inside the detention room. Could it be that time travelers cannot control the moment of their own time displacement? Because the incident was so bizarre, police officer Ponomarenko decided to open an investigation. And he discovered that in 1978, there truly was a person named Sergey who went missing. However, this person was clearly an elderly person, and the time of the missing person report was 1978, which didn't match the time Sergey spoke of. What exactly is going on? Despite problem after problem, the police followed the records and found the person who reported Sergey missing years ago, Valentina. After the police told her the reason for their visit, Valentina showed the police an album of photos. Inside, there were photos not only of Sergey, but also photos of the two of them together. We see that the young girl in Sergey's photo back then is the elderly woman, standing before them now. Ms. Valentina told the police that Sergey did go missing for a short period in 1958. She remembered this because after he returned from his disappearance, Sergey became a completely different person. Sergey even participated in a radio program to talk about the future he had seen. And later, the police also found the audio recordings of this program in the archives of the National Archives of Ukraine. This could also prove that when Sergey suddenly disappeared at that time, it was because he had returned to his original time-space. Here, I will help everyone reorganize the timeline a bit. On April 23, 1958, due to a UFO, Sergey time-traveled to April 23, 2006. And then he returned to 1958, lived there for more than 20 years. Finally, for some reason, he went missing again in 1978, and when the police asked, "Do you think Sergey is still alive?" Ms. Valentina answered confidently that he was still alive because a few years ago she had to be hospitalized for heart surgery. When she returned home, she found a postcard in her mailbox. The man on the postcard looked exactly like Sergey, who went missing in 1978. Even his hair and clothing were identical. The back of the postcard wrote, "I am living well. I will be back soon." The key point is that someone found the location where Sergey took the photo. Everyone can see in the picture that the building behind Sergey hasn't been built yet. Could it be that this time Sergey time traveled to an even further future? So, is this incident real or fake? Actually, I feel this is truly up to the individual. After all, those who believe will believe, and those who don't believe will deny it no matter how much evidence they see. However, when we searched for documentation, we did find one rather strange point. That is, Sergey's last postcard has been doubted. This postcard could have proven that Sergey was in a distant future, but some of the buildings behind him seemed to be duplicates. Therefore, some people believe that this photo was very likely photoshopped. This indirectly suggests that the story of Sergey might be a staged event. And many people also believe that the final postcard was intentionally created by someone after the incident became widespread, which is why people saw the duplicated buildings appear. So, what do you all think? Do you believe the story of Sergey ever happened? And do you think the final postcard is trustworthy? And most importantly, have any of you ever suspected that you yourselves have time traveled? Welcome everyone to comment and share. Thank you for watching. If you like, you can subscribe to catch the next videos. Or if you have time, you can watch other videos on this channel.